There it is. Now it's doing it. See, I wanted to get all the story.
You got to get the contents or push the right button.
Yeah, right.
Oh dear, I'm
so. You said they moved about 500?
I was just reading about it, and Hudson's got this all written up that you can use.
You know what I thought we would do is if we can, I'll make copies of everything and get them back to you, but and then when we get back, if we can get to, well, look at this. I've tried to get pictures. Look at this picture in bloom.
Oh, that's an old. That's when I first got my, regular camera. Now I've got a digital one.
That is really a nice picture.
Yeah, it said 2 trees of the 500 died, and they lost about 3 years of production.
Oh my goodness!
But of course, the highway paid us. Actually, we had to do a lot of convincing, but they were fair with us. I mean.
Now, who's in this picture here?
That's Rodney and Julia Shake with our 3 little boys. And this is in the living room of this house. And this is Jim, the oldest, and Steve, and that's Terry. Was just knew that would have been taken in 1952. And that's Julia and Hudson when he was in the service. Probably he didn't have anything on it. Probably about 1944 would be my guess.
Julia was his mother?
Right. She was a Dixon. They lived in Payette. And her dad was a carpenter, and he built this house. And this tells you all about it. They lived in tents in the summertime, the boys and their dad, and planted the orchard and stuff. And then finally he built this house. And I think the house was built in Hudson thinks about 1918.
Who's this one?
Oh, this is Hudson as a little guy with somebody that's down at Crystal City, which is where they lived half the time, see? This story here tells about
Crystal City.
Texas. Texas, fairly close to San Antonio.
I remember reading something about, why were they down there? Why did they?
Well, because Hudson's dad, Rodney, got this job. Like I say, this orchard was rented, and they made some money, some years, off the fruit. But that wasn't really Dad's thing. He wasn't a farmer at heart. He got bored with driving the horse and digging up. Yeah. He's told this story. He wondered what the boys were doing in town. So anyway, that's why, but the family owned the thing, and so he saw that it was leased, and they lost money, and they made a little money. But anyway, he got this job with this Denny company, which was they were salespeople. They came and looked over the crops and things, and they all converged on the Bancroft Hotel every fall. This is the way they used to do it in the old days. Well, somehow Dad got acquainted with them, and he hired Dad to do all of this, to go around and pick the crops, and the good crops, and take care of that. Well, that was fine, and it really was quite a good paying job. All through the Depression, why, they fared pretty well, because he had this job, and of course people still had to eat. Anyway, then it turned so that right after Thanksgiving he went down to Crystal City, Texas, and he bought spinach and the stuff. See, they grow stuff, all through the winter down there. And then they went to Georgia, and he bought peaches, and then what else did they do? Potatoes somewhere. So they had this cycle for, Hudson was in the 5th grade or something when they did this. And he graduated from high school down in Crystal City, but he'd go from when they started in the fall until Thanksgiving time, or Christmas, I guess, and then they'd get in the car and drive down to Crystal City.
So then what did he would buy, and then they'd ship them up here on the railroad or something? Or
they shipped in Crystal City. They shipped they go out and pick spinach in baskets, and at that time and maybe they still do, I don't know, they threw ice in with it and put it in an iced railroad car, and they shipped it to the East Coast.
Oh, to the east.
Yeah, he never came here. And then that's the same thing that he did for a while here in Idaho. And everything was shipped in these railroad cars. They called them icers. And each end was full of ice with a big fan in front of it. And sometimes they'd get back there in good shape, and sometimes they didn't. It was before the refrigerated cars. See?
Well, is that how they ship the fruit also?
Yeah, in those days, yeah. Definitely.
Huh.
I don't know when the electrical or how they, the refrigeration deal, when that started, but Hudson would know.
Huh. And this is...
Oh, that's Hudson and I with our firstborn. Just kids we were.
Yeah, how old were you?
Well, he was 24 and I was 21.
You know something, by the time we was that age, we had 3 kids.
You got married younger, huh?
Who's this?
That's Rodney Shake, and this is the old house. I don't know if you know what it is. They bought this from Jim Palumbo, J.C. Palumbo, and there was a siding called Ingard right there. You know where Howells live? Or, used to live?
Down there, yeah.
Right over the railroad track there on that road?
Yeah.
Well, that house is on the corner now with a big, it's got big evergreens around it and lots of trees. That was where Hudson's folks bought that place. And they remodeled it. But this is where Dad is, and so that's probably about, Hudson doesn't have any dates on these, 39 or 40. And they remodeled that house. And then we packed fruit, prunes and apples out of that Ingard station. It was an old packing house that the walls were stuffed with sawdust. Really? Well, in 1947 it burned up, and that was that. Oh. That's why we had to build this new one in 48.
So that's how they insulated?
Yeah, all of the old, just like the old ice house that was out by Washoe Slough there. That was the same thing. I don't know if it's still standing. But they had these really thick, it was wood inside, and they had these really thick walls, and they were stuffed with sawdust. And it was like as close as they could get as to a cold storage.
Yeah.
Before they had, refrigerated deals. And we used to have people, of course, a lot of our help smoked in those days, so we never knew how the fire started. But also there could have been truncheons in there, who knows? But it burned in November, so we were packing apples, But nobody then could store them, They didn't have CA or anything. So
you said this was Hudson?
That's Hudson in Crystal City. You can't hardly see him.
Yeah. And this is the one over in
This is the one in Payette.
Yeah.
I think Josephson's owned it now. It burned down too. But they own what was our controlled atmosphere storage, which is right on the tracks to the right there. It still operates, I think. I don't know if it operates as a CA storage because there's not that many apples around. And this is from the fruit deal.
Wow, isn't this back a few years?
Yeah, now who is that? It's
Tony Hingler.
And this is Sam Ranelli. He bought out Palumbo in Payette, and that's
Hudson. Local packers and shippers displaying blue ribbons.
In the old days when you got your pictures in the paper in the Statesman.
Pacific International Livestock.
Oh, I'm darned. And this is just pictures of the packing house.
Oh, good.
In Payette, like I say. And then he saved some things, and we've dated them.
Modern apple processing machinery.
We had tables that went around and around. They were sized and sorted, and they came onto these tables, and then the girls stood around there and packed them. They had various things there.
When I was a kid, I ring-faced prunes, and I sure wished we'd got pictures of us ring-facing prunes.
Yeah, boy, we had some girls. I tried it. I started working in the packing house the fall before we were married because they needed ring facers. Well, I wasn't that speedy, so I didn't stay
I
at
didn't
that
either.
job
I
that
didn't
long.
make much
no,
money.
I didn't. They put you on, and paid you a regular deal, and then if you could make it, you could make more than what the... But
10 cents a ring faces.
I can't remember any of that stuff.
But do you remember Christine Carnifex?
Oh, yeah.
She was the champ.
I bet.
She could really do them, but
well,
the rest of us
lots
couldn't
of
keep up.
experience.
Yeah, she was older than me, so that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
Said in here that Beckwith shipped 130 carloads of apples.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I'm sure that there's somewhere in there it tells of the big years when this valley, you can't hardly believe it now, but they did. They just had Italian prunes and apples coming out their ears. And
oh man, this has got so much information.
Well, this is it. You can glean a lot just by reading this stuff and picking and choosing what you want to use.
Yeah.
Like I say, I think there's more stuff here than you can ever use.
Is it going to be okay if we take it home and make copies and get it back to you?
And of course all the pictures we want back.
Oh, sure. Oh, you'll get everything back.
Yeah.
Because I'll just scan them into.
And maybe you don't probably want to use them all. But
I'll scan them into the computer. Oh, here's a prize. Look at this one.
that's the way they went up to. That's they dumped them. They were in bins. First they were in boxes when we started, then they were in bins, and they had a big dumper and it put them on that thing and takes it up. And at one time, and I think that goes in, we had a washer. They came out wet, and then they had to, because we had to get all the spray and stuff off. Then they went over something that kind of dried them off. Then it went to the sorters, and they made short work with a lot of them. And then it went to the packers. There was quite a...
This was in your sheds, wasn't it? Yeah?
Yeah, Yeah, all these pictures of it packing were in our packing house. The one in Payette, and they didn't have any pictures of the one in it was old, because Dad had bought it in '39, and I forget that he had it had a big boiler in it that he had to go out there and fire that up at the crack of dawn. But I'm not sure what the procedure was there, but Hudson knows. And it wasn't near as extensive as this other. It just had a sorting table, and then they put them, I guess they were packing them in bushel baskets. So they must have ring-faced them, but it wasn't as long, and it wasn't as, what you do with your commodity changes as to what the public demands, They used to just put them in a bushel basket, and they could be in there loose or whatever. And then if you were shipping them, I don't know, then they ring-faced, and
put a fancy top on them.
Yeah, then we used to put prunes in those little half-bushel baskets when Hudson and I were first married. Then everything went to boxes then, see? It's a continual struggle to keep up with
we
changing size.
Yeah, we saw a deal, and it was back east in Iowa, wasn't it? Illinois and Iowa, where they were
Iowa.
They were picking apples in barrels.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I've asked several people, and nobody's.
This is out of my grandparents.
It's got to be. It must have been for the juicers or the cannery or the something, because you can't handle apples that way.
No.
You've got, even if you put them in a bin. Now we first thought, we started with the boxes, and the pickers had the bags that opened up, and you gently put them in there. And if one picker had a bunch of bruised ones, why, we'd have to scold them and tell them, now, just be a little more careful. Then they went to these bins, and then the guys had to kind of stand over there, let them down, But it all worked, But they will bruise if you treat them right.
Apple several years.
Yeah.
I picked for Don Graham quite a bit, and I can't remember all the places I picked.
You
picked for Sir Meyer. I picked for Carpenter.
Yeah, but you picked for Jack and Jean's relation.
Oh, Alexander or something like that, down the road here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
That mostly I picked for Don Graham, and I picked for Marvin Miss too.
Yeah, and Vorp's had a place in there too. I don't know if they had.
Yeah, no, when I was really a kid, I picked Bing cherries for Ray Schubert.
Oh dear, I picked cherries. That's a hard job. It wasn't too good. I had a heck of a time moving the dang ladder around, I tell you.
He set the ladder, but he had those huge
they're
trees
so
up in our
big.
yard, in his yard there. And I was talking to Neil a while back, and now I'm going to see if Neil will draw me a picture. He said that big old ladder, I knew they put it up to the tree, and then we'd go up the ladder. He said it was 22 feet, did he say?
Well, most picking ladders that we had were 20 feet.
And then we'd go up in the tree, and we could see from the other side of Fruitland, we could see the smokestack of the sugar factory in this
Lord, you were way up there. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe ours weren't that tall,
But that had wheels on it, didn't it?
He said it had long
Yeah.
handles and wheels on it.
because
but
see,
they
you're
moved it.
typical. You know how they are. They've got this one thing. They got the ladder side, and then you got to plant that one. You better plant it pretty good and steady. And then they're long, heavy things to pack around.
I found stuff, and as I find stuff, I'm putting it into the computer, and then I want to expound on it. So I found this on the shakes. That's what I put together.
So where'd you find this, Marilyn?
Oh,
In a book.
different places. I've gotten a lot of things. I've taken the census.
Oh,
I pulled the census off, and then I can tell where they were born.
Yeah, well,
You know, and it's by 10-year settings, and then I make up a story.
Yeah, 40 acres is for the land was. Yeah, they bought this 40 acres from a guy named Pathel, who'd been out here since they started
Where's my...
even developing the Fruitland area, see. It's a turn of the century. See, my grandmother, my dad was a Pathel, and I don't know how they spell it, P-H-A, Hudson could tell you, T-H-E-A-L. And he had, I don't know, a big bunch of land.
I'll just put it down like it's...
He lived where Shaw's old place is right here now.
Oh,
This
okay.
Pathel did. That was the Pathel place. Anyway, that's where Shake bought from. It doesn't say there, but he did.
No, because see, I found the obituary, and I found the...
7 children, yeah. Homer H., Harold R., Rodney H., Helen, she's the one that didn't marry, was a school teacher. Dorothy, now there's some since that.
Was there?
Yeah, there's another girl. Who is it here? Wait a minute.
But I have...
Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay, here's Irene.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
After coming to Idaho.
Irene. Alice, yeah. That's 7 then, okay. She went to school, graduated from Fruitland High. Irene did. She's got her picture up in there. The rest of them went to school in Payette.
Well, where's the 7? I'm not seeing
They're all
7.
there. Well, I know there's 7.
Okay, so I have 7 here, but I got 1, 2, 3. Is Helen Francis one person?
Yes, they've got all their
5.
Dorothy.
Oh, Lola.
Lola. And
Lola.
Irene. And Irene was the
Okay.
baby.
They were born after coming to Idaho.
Uh-huh. The others of them were born in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we've been back here to Glen Spey, where the old man was buried. And he had 4 wives. I tell you, those old boys were hard on wives. It was funny because we went to the Pences. See, I was a Pence. So we went to close to Pittsburgh, where he was buried. And old George Washington Pence also had 4 wives. I tell you, well, you know, they married him young, but they had kids, and
And they worked so
And they
dang
worked
hard.
so
And we
hard.
found that with, we were, one of cousin way back when, came the other day, and he was a grandson of my Grandma Evans's sister.
Oh, uh-huh.
But Grandma never let her children know any of the first family.
Oh, uh-huh.
Her father was married before. Her mother was married before too.
Well, yeah, because
she
they
wouldn't,
lost their spouses early on.
but she would never let them get to know any of their other family, you know, and so. And he said his mother was the same, his grandmother was the same way, so nobody knows anything.
Yeah, I guess in those days they just thought, well, the immediate family was what.
I
That's real funny,
suppose.
because I have two aunts. I guess you'd call them half aunts or something like that.
That almost sounds bad.
Step aunts, maybe.
Yes, but I never did consider them. I always considered them aunts.
Yeah.
We weren't around them because they moved away from, and my mom was the oldest one of the second bunch, or second oldest of the second bunch, but she never distinguished any, they were always her sisters.
It's so different. Back there they can have so much land, but when you come out here you can't farm that much land. You know, they couldn't have then.
Because they don't irrigate, do they?
Right.
They just let nature take care of it.
Right. But do you know if were they into fruit before they came out here? It says here that he was a carpenter.
That's right. I don't think so. Now, Hudson might know about that. But in 1902, they moved to Payette. 1908. They purchased 40 acres 8 miles south of Payette.
Now, I thought maybe that was it. This is the place. Is that what they bought then?
Yeah, that's what they bought. 40 acres. Here comes a man that will know all of that.
And it says that land was in alfalfa when he purchased the farm.
Well, like I say, I think that this Pathel had 160 acres. I mean, this just grew sagebrush out here. My grandmother, she was married. She was married in 1902, and she and her girlfriend used to ride horseback out here. They'd pack lunch and they'd start at the crack of dawn. And she told me one time, we always said this would be good farmland because that sagebrush was growing tall. It brushed the horses' bellies, and there was only 3 or 4 places out here then. Where they went, I know they knew some of them, and they'd stop. But that was an outing. They were quite the horsewomen in those days. Cars hadn't hardly been invented. But
you know where the old highway is between Payette and across the river, Long Washoe, and then follow the Payette on the side all the way to Emmett. You know where that is?
Well, Marilyn's got something here that she'd gotten put together that you might like to read. You sit over here. And it goes back to Gus's folks, and it tells how they came from New York State and then they went to Minnesota and all of that. So you get over there, and it doesn't say when Gus came here. It says in there that he was a carpenter,
and I got that. I'm sure I got that from census
that's right,
papers.
because he was a carpenter. Like I say, he built this house.
But he was a miller first.
Valley Miller, yeah, he had the.
But Gus was the one that was born in New York.
Well, that's what this says. Just read it. But it also tells about his parents being born in Germany.
Right in here is
he was
right.
born.
Just read that and see
And
if
he
that.
was one of 12 sons.
Wow.
Old George had 2 wives, and each one of them bore him 6
I told
sons.
him he had 4. Or was that Peter? I thought he had more than 2 wives.
No, just 2.
All right, I'm sorry. Peter had 4. I know that because I got a picture of their headstones.
Well,
didn't have
they
quite
had
that
lots
many
of wives
kids. He
then
only had,
because a
I
lot
think
of
there were
women
7 or
died
8,
in
but you know,
childbirth.
Yeah,
you know,
that-
we
that's right.
saw,
Yeah.
we've
So
got a
they were-
map that
They
was
had
dated
some pretty hard lives.
1965 of this county where Peter was born, and they had all of the
So
names.
I was gonna
just
give you
by their
this.
names,
Okay.
the places,
And
and there
you
were quite,
can,
there were other Pences besides
If you,
his Pence.
have you read
But
it yet?
No.
we went by the place, it looked
So,
like it couldn't have
she
been
was,
more than 20
Shirley
or
was telling us
30
about,
acres at the
was
most.
your dad?
Then they had all these
that
kids, see?
that
No wonder they went somewhere else.
would travel down to Texas
You know,
and.
the girls
and,
just got married.
did the, almost like brokering, or.
Well, yeah, that's
He
what it
was a broker. Yeah, I
Okay.
couldn't.
Actually, he was a fruit and vegetable buyer
But
for
he's-
2 wholesale warehouses, one in Chicago and one in Philadelphia,
I can get you.
that was owned by 2 brothers. And they hired him.
I want to get your,
She's got a camera there
that picks up the sound,
picks
so
up
that
the
will help
sound.
us to.
Yeah, well, Dad, of course, was quite a baseball pitcher. Everybody in here knew him. They won the state championship in 11, 12, and 13 in baseball. Payette did. And that they played against Nampa and Boise and Caldwell and all those big ones, see? And he was their only pitcher.
Really got to work now.
After he graduated from high school in 1913, well then he pitched for a semi-pro team. You know, and you've heard of Walter Johnson from Weezer? Well, Dad was from Payette, and they played against each other. Sometimes one win, sometimes the other. Then I don't know exactly when it was. I think it was during the war, 16 or 17. He hit a triple and slid into third base, but he tore his shoulder out.
Oh, so he
And that
can
ended
pitch.
his pitching career right then. But we always, when we traveled, we always went to the ball games.
Great fan of ball games forever.
Well, anyway, he was helping grandmother run the farm. He was the only son left here, and they didn't, he got a deferment, didn't have to go to the,
Right.
on account of that. And he finally decided he was going to enlist. So on November the 11th, 1917, he drove to Boise to enlist.
And the war
And
was,
guess you know,
Yeah.
we walked in there and they said, "Hey, the war's just over."
You're a little late, huh?
The harvest. So he said that's the closest he
Yeah.
ever coming to serve.
Huh.
So then he went back here and worked on the farm. And let's see, grandmother died in, I think, 21. Yeah. So Helen, who was teaching the one-room schoolhouse down at Whitley Bottom.
Bottom. That
Oh,
was their
really?
first,
Yeah,
What, do you know what the name of the school was? Was it?
Whitley.
Oh, okay.
Whitley.
Yeah, yeah. Whitley School,
Okay.
yeah. Just like the Washoe School
Which is
and all
still
these
there.
other one-room.
We've heard different names and never knew where some of them were.
Well, as you go down that road, you know, you go clear up the top of the hill and then take the road towards the Snake River. And you go by the cherry orchards of, what's your name?
Sir Myers?
Surmeyer.
Oh.
Or, I mean,
Or signs? Or some,
the old folks that were down there.
I know
Anyway.
got me.
You go clear down, and it's pretty steep at last to go into the bottom. And as you go down there, you make a right turn to go back north. And just across from that turn, there's a big open area. And that's where the school was,
Really?
right there.
Okay.
Because she used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, get the old horse, and go down there and get ready to teach. And
Start the
everything.
fire.
Yeah, I had to set the fire. Yeah, she told us all about that.
Wow.
So, Dad, like I say, he run the farm, but he never liked it.
I told Marilyn he didn't have his heart in farming.
Well, Uncle Harold had a bar in Payette. And they had pool tables and all like that, and Dad loved to shoot pool. He'd become the pool shark around. Anybody coming in, you know, wanting somebody, why, they'd call on Rod Shake. So one day, this was in 1930. He was in there shooting pool, and these two brothers that owned these warehouses, one in Chicago, one in Philadelphia, come in, and they heard he was a pretty good pool shooter. And they thought they were too. Well, he cleaned them both. And then they got to visiting and talking, and they were there buying apples. And at that time, there was a heck of a lot of apples in here. We had, I think Payette County that year shipped 8,000 carloads of apples. The old bunker type cars.
Just put them in there. What? Are they in baskets or?
Yeah, in baskets, bushel baskets. Had ice in the bunkers. So they would buy 30 to 35 carloads, have them shipped back, put in their storage. They'd store them, meet them out during the winter. But they didn't know people around here, so they asked Dad, they says, well, are you familiar with people around here? Yeah, he says, I think everybody knows me pretty well. And he says, I know everybody. Yeah. Well, he says, we want to buy good fruit. We don't want to buy junk stuff or people who put bad stuff underneath and then put nice ones on top and say it's all good. Yeah, and Dad says, I understand what you're saying and I know who they are. So he says, well, how many cars do you want? And he told him. When do you want them? What kind do you want? Because there was Jonathan's and Goldens and Red Delicious and Wine Sap.
Did they have Goldens then?
Oh yeah.
Well, they had Wine Saps.
Wine Saps and Gatos and all kinds of stuff.
Gano, yeah.
So they told him what he wanted. He took them right around to the orchard, showed them, introduced them to the guys. They made their deal. Everything was done on a handshake in those days. Nothing was ever written down.
Yeah.
And so Dad, they went back, of course, after they bought what they wanted. And Dad went and saw the packing procedure and stuff and made sure that the right people or the right stuff got to them. So anyway, they told him after the deal was over, which is about a little past Thanksgiving, they said, well, Rod, we got a lot of citrus to buy in Texas, and they have a lot of onions and spinach. And would you be interested in going down and doing the same thing down there as you did with the apples? And they offered him, now get this, 1930, right now, Depression. They offered him a new car every year. They paid for all of our expenses, Mother and myself, put us up in a hotel down there, and him. And all of our lodging and our meals and clothing for a year, and $200 a month,
For goodness sake.
which is a fortune. Well, like he told me, he says, I couldn't hardly turn that down. He says,
No,
he says,
yeah.
everybody was making 25 and 40
Yeah.
cents an hour, and he says, here I'm going to make $200 a month and have all my expenses.
All the expenses taken care of, yeah.
So he said, sure, even though he says, I don't know anything about the country or anybody there.
Spinach or anybody learn.
Well, he said, the boys told him, says, you do fine, just go down there. And it says, we have several people that we buy from, and we'll tell them that you're coming. And they'll show you around and get you acquainted with everything. So we waited until the Christmas holidays so I wouldn't miss school. And we went down. Of course, we went to Portland to see Aunt Dorothy, and we went down to San Jose to see Aunt Helen, Irene, and Aunt Lola. They were there. And then went down southern part of California, and then straight across New Mexico, Arizona, down into Texas. Had this new car. And we got down there just a little bit before the first of the year. Mother went in to find out I was in the 3rd grade. She found out that they were way ahead of me in what I had. So she had the teacher give us some materials to get me up to where, because here I'd never heard of the multiplication tables, and they were in the 3 times 3 already.
Uh-oh. That'd been bad news for me. Arithmetic, I wouldn't do good.
So there for about 2 or 3 days, my mother and I boned up to get me caught up with them. And we went from 1930 through 1939, 10 years, each
Really?
year like that. I'd start
my
school in
goodness.
Fayette, and we'd have the apple deal all finished, go down to Texas again. So I had 2 classmates, I've had 2 reunions, you know. So it's been...
So you got to go to the same school each year?
Yeah,
down there,
yeah, I
then?
was always back
Yeah,
at the same
Crystal
school.
City was just a little...
There was only one hitch that I ran into. Texas at that time were number 1 in the United States in education, because they had the oil wells.
Oh,
And
lots of money.
their school system, they had given 1 section out of so many sections for the school. I never had to buy a book, a pencil, a piece of paper, nothing. They didn't have any food, you know, for us, but other than that. And they had the finest teachers they could find. The ones coming in used to brag and say, well, I must be a pretty good teacher. They told me they were going to pay me double if I'd come to Texas. Says that we're looking for good teachers.
Well, for instance.
But they only had 11 grades, 7 plus 4. So when I finished the 7th grade down there, this each year I finished down there, I started the 8th grade back in Fayette. And I don't know, did you know Pauline Howerton?
Yeah, yeah.
Tough old gal.
Yeah.
Taught it forever.
She was the head of the 8th grade. And I went in and got the stuff, and I looked it over, and after the first day I said, well, Mrs. Howerton, I said, I've already had this. She says, what do you mean? Well, I says, I've just looked over all of this stuff. I had this last year down in Texas. Well, you have? Well, he says, we'll make sure about that. So she gave me the final exam for the 8th grade. I got a 99 on it. She said, yes, you already had it, all right.
So he skipped a
So I
grade.
skipped the 9th grade, went up to a
The 9th.
9th.
Oh, yeah.
Well, freshman.
You actually, well, you skipped the 8th grade.
Skipped 8th.
Yeah.
So I was in a different class then in Payette. But of course, when I went to Texas, it was right back was the same ones. But that was the only thing, things like that. But no, it's been a terrifically interesting life that I've led, because every year when school was over, and that's when the spinach and the onions were also done in last of May, 1st of June, then we would take a trip through the east and visit the two brothers, the one in Philadelphia and the one in Chicago. And also,
Well, you go to Georgia and stuff. You did that on the...
well, we had
Or did
a red potato deal down in Loxley, Alabama, and a peach deal in Georgia, and caught those, going up.
For goodness sake.
So, and then we would see everything, and Mother, of course, Dad taught me to be the guide on how to read the map and everything, and the roads are quite different than they are now, I guess you know. So Mother and I, we'd look at where we were going to go the next day, and we'd try to figure out some place that we'd like to see, and then I put us right close to it. We'd get there, and then Mother'd say, well, Rodney, there's a place right up here that looks pretty interesting.
Sounds like you. She does that to me.
Yeah.
And he's always one of these A to B drivers, fast as he could. So anyway, we stopped at a lot of them, and I guess you know who was the last one to leave
He enjoyed it once he stopped.
to get back to the car was Dad. So he finally woke up to what was going on, and he joined in from then on,
Yeah.
And we looked at the old Civil War sites all through the...
You really got an education. then.
Oh yeah, because they still had the slave quarters were still there then in the 30s. Yeah, and no, it was terrific. Actually, I was in 42 of the 48 states before I was out of high school.
Good lands.
Quite an education, I have to say.
Well, I got to Oregon, but that's because it was only 2 miles away.
I've been from California.
So of course, we got a million stories. But then after the war, of course, I went to Oregon State also. That's where Dad and...
Well, and Harold, wasn't he the pharmacist? I never knew he had a bar. He did
Well,
that.
he had that before he went
to college.
Went to college. Both of them,
Always money in bars.
Harold and Homer and Dad, all three of them went to Oregon State. Dad could only go 1 year on account of his dad dying, and then he had to come back. But so I asked him, I said, well, where will I go? And, well, Dad says, Oregon State's a good place. He says, I think you ought to go there. I said, okay. What do you think I ought to take? Well, he says, it's an agricultural and a mechanical school. Engineering. And he said, if you want agriculture, you can stay here and run the farm.
Learn the experience.
I wasn't too particular about doing that either. Well, he says, try the engineering course. He says, doesn't make any difference. The first 2 years, they teach you basic engineering, which is good in any business. They teach you how to think, how to reason, how to plan, how to do this, how to do that, see. So that's what I did. And they had the ROTC like they do now. So immediately I go into that. So that happened in 1940s when I went in. Then I got pulled into active duty and sent to officer training, you know, the old story. And I ended up like my dad.
Never saw any action.
I was in training as a B-29 flight engineer. Had my wings, everything. And real excited one day, we were going to take our first flight. I've been up in B-17s and B-24s, but not in a 29. So we got up and we went into a B-29 and flew over Cuba and come back on the 14th of August.
And the next day the war was over.
And when we landed, everybody come run, hey, the war's over, the war's over.
Our kids used to say, you know how boys are, they always want to know what daddy did more. For the most part, he was either studying or that he taught, you know, had
My
classes.
dad got a big kick out of that. That's the same thing that happened.
Yeah. You went up and come down, and that was all it took. The war was
I
over.
never got up in a 29 again.
Yeah.
And 3 months later, they had a directive, regardless of points, any flight engineer that wants to go home can go.
Thanks. Huh.
So in 5th of December in 45, I came home.
Huh.
And I went back to Oregon State to see, you know, what I had to do to finish, because I had 3.5 years of engineering. I talked to the Dean of Engineering, and he says, well, I hate to tell you this, but he says, you know, with the rapid advances that were made during the war, it would take more than the 1/4 that you're short. It'd probably take at least 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
Because you'd have to pick up all this other stuff. And here I've been going through all of these schools all my life, and I said, no way.
Not
So I
interested.
come back and told my folks about it, and Dad says, well, he says, that isn't too bad. He says, 2 years. He says, you could do that if you wanted to. And I said, yeah, but I don't really want to. I said, but I could, the only nice thing about it, I can make $5,000 a year as an engineer for Boeing. That's what they're offering to the graduates. But I have to wait 2 years to get it. Oh, he said, is that right? Stuff in Orchard. Well, he says, you know, your mother and I knew Orchard. So I'll just keep going until the old orchard quits. And then they pull it out. So that's how it finally happened all over the place. And I could see it going downhill pretty fast, so, and the prune deal too. So I got out when the getting out was
Right. Right.
good. Well, I bored you enough about
No, you haven't bored us
you
at all.
got it all written in there, Marilyn,
that.
which you
Yeah.
can, and you can just pick out of that. I mean, there's no way you guys could use all the stuff these people tell you.
That's interesting. I mean,
Well,
Well,
some of these pictures were, you know, so short on
Yeah,
pictures.
she
and
said
Yeah.
she wanted to take some of that stuff and she'll make copies of it.
Yeah.
I'll get it back, all back
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, that shows putting the prunes on the table. And then this is,
And there might be something in these newspaper things that, you know, you'll pick
Yeah.
out that are kind of, give you some idea about
Well, you
it.
know, we've tried to find descendants even of people that were first in the area, you know, and it's really kind of hard, but finding out why they came. Like, why did your grandparents decide to come? Do you know?
We don't really know, do we? Just because it
well,
was...
I know with
I know why
Gustav.
Peter Pan. I know why Peter Pan.
I know why Gustav come, because, like I say, he was a miller back there. And they were wanting to put a mill into Payette.
Well, I've read some accounts like the mines were here first. People came out west and they were mining.
Right.
And then some people came. One guy I heard about that came with the idea of supplying wild game to the miners.
Well, yeah, the
And-
supplier people are the ones that came next.
And that down along the river, they grew hay. A lot of people settled down there and grew hay for the horses for the mines.
Right.
So it sounds like a lot maybe got started by trying to provide for the people
Oh,
in
yeah.
the mines.
Because you see, Washoe was a big
Well, that's kind of
center,
where Boomerang
center
was,
place.
you know,
Yeah.
to start
And,
with.
and when they
railroad.
decided to build a railroad through, why, they cut all of the lumber up above and floated down the Payette River and had a log jam right at Washoe and a big sawmill to cut the ties for the railroad. They cut all of the ties for the railroad between Twin Falls and Portland, right there. It's quite a deal, see. And there was a nice little community of Washoe there. They had their own school. They had a nice auditorium. And my mother's best friend, Phoebe Gleim, was the teacher at the school. And we used to go out there for all of their deals. And she had a son the same age as I, and we had a lot of fun playing out there, you know.
Well, was Washoe what they called Boomerang then?
No,
Or that-
Boomerang
Was along the railroad?
Boomerang was where Chuck Kinney's place is.
Oh, down by the slough.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
That was the big slough.
Washoe Slough.
Yeah. But the town of Washoe was about a mile further.
Oh.
So there were actually two little settlements.
Yeah.
I see.
Well, actually, Boomerang was the sawmill
Oh.
and
okay.
just the
Oh.
things around it, you know.
Do you know where, I think the name of it, was there like a Pleasant View or Pleasant something school?
That's
Do you know where
out
the,
here. You know, I don't for sure, because that's where Fruitland started. It's
wherever the Pleasant School was?
that Pleasant View. You know,
The Pleasant School, I know where that was.
Pleasant View. It was.
Pleasant View, right. That was right, you know, where my dad's four sisters bought 10 acres. And over there, between here and New Plymouth.
And you called it the orchard.
Orchard
Track
track.
is what you called it, yeah.
And that was my first job, was to go irrigate and spray and take care of that one, 10 acres. Well, just about, you know where, I'm trying to think of the names of, get one of those senior moments.
Oh, we have lots of
Oh,
those,
we do too.
unfortunately.
Down there where the old, there was three brothers.
Smiths,
Are you talking about Schmid's?
Hmm?
Are you
Not
talking about
Schmid's.
Schmid's?
Smiths.
Oh, heavens, how did you forget that one?
Oh, it's easy. Anyway, the first Smith, you know, they're on that one road over from the highway
yeah, over
over there. And the first Smith's house And then you keep going on to that, and you go down underneath the place, and you come up, and the second SMID has the big buildings, and where it has a lot of equipment and everything like that. That's where Pleasant View was.
No, that's what we thought too, but that's been proven wrong.
Well,
There's this old school.
there's an old school there, but I thought that was called
It was called Sunnyside.
Sunnyside.
Yeah, so, see, we ran into the same thing on
With
this
the
thing for our
church, too.
church.
Mhm.
I went to the library and went back 1908, 1909, when the church was built. And everything in their news, they had all the local news, they'd have the Payette and some from New Plymouth because it was developing, but everything came up Pleasant View, Pleasant View. They didn't call it a schoolhouse or anything, but it was like a community.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, where is that, you know? Well, as we went on, we found that the nucleus for Fruitland, and especially these Methodists that were around, or wanted to be Methodists, came from this area. And to this day, I'm not sure where it is. And we just really never...
Well, you know, out
'Cause
there, where Fried and Art Lee
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we found where a lot of that was platted out into
10 acres.
10-acre plots.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
so-
10
Yeah,
acres.
well,
that
that's
they-
where that 10 acre you're talking about comes
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
always wondered where they got all of their building rights that they sell all the time. They're always selling these building rights. And it must be because they were all plotted out in 10 acre.
Well, in other words, you would
plots.
think from that they were thinking they were starting the community,
Yeah,
wouldn't you?
yeah.
Because you need 40 acres or something
Yeah.
if you're going to farm.
Well, actually, as you know about
I
New
don't
Plymouth, that was a
Planned
corporation,
deal,
a planned deal. see. And
But
and all of those were divided so that people could live in New Plymouth, but they could go out and farm, or they could hire somebody to do it. And like they say, the town of New Plymouth was set up for people to live.
not the
But,
farm.
but none of the farms were set up to build on.
No.
They were just
Well, in New
farms.
Plymouth,
Just a
those
farm.
houses, you know, what are they? They're not even, they're like lots, you know,
Yeah.
they aren't
Yeah.
even an acre. So,
Right.
so that was the way that was planned, but
Yeah.
this other, we never could quite figure that out. There was nobody
found-
alive that could tell us
Right.
about it.
I found where that when they put the village together, they gave land to the Brethren and to the Methodists
That's
to
right.
build the churches. And then I read several places where this guy named John Hall homesteaded 160 acres. I can't find where he homesteaded 160 acres there in Fruitland. The only John Hall I can find wasn't even there very long, and he didn't, and it says he was, on the census, everything he answered, everything unknown. He never answered any questions on the census except for his name.
He didn't.
That's the only John Hall I have found. And also, when that John Hall was there, it was after the village had already been kind of formed, so he couldn't have homesteaded
Yeah.
because the land was already.
Yeah.
So I haven't got all that figured out yet. But Neil Schubert was telling me that he understood, and he and Glenn Beckwith are cousins, and they got together and they said they understood that their grandparents, the Schuberts and the Beckwiths, were basically sent out by the Brethren Church, or the Dunkards, they called them.
Oh, yeah.
They encouraged people to come out and settle out here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And
Just
so,
like the New Plymouth bunch.
yeah, and that's, is that right? 'Cause then they were
Yeah, the
like
New Plymouth
missionaries, they were
Oh,
sending
yeah.
them out on a mission, kind of. That's how they, so New Plymouth was set up so they would live in their horseshoe and
Yeah,
go
well,
out
yeah.
to
They just
farm.
planned
Yeah,
to
Go outside
the
to
town, and of course,
community, yeah.
I suppose even at that time, why the main drag
Well,
was the highway going through.
You know,
especially
it was based on the old European system
Yeah.
Oh,
of having a castle on a hill and the people right around it, and then the farmland out
Out.
from that.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's
That
the
was
way
the
it
same
goes,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah. This happened to be a horseshoe instead of
Right.
a circle.
Yeah.
Okay, kid, did you ever discover where Zeller's Crossing really was?
I guess so, yeah.
Because I haven't been able to.
Well, now that's another, like I say, Vernita knows a lot of this stuff, and I didn't write it down, and so I don't really know. I sat through all of the meetings that we had and everything, and we're putting out a cookbook. Strangers are getting ready to have their son print it now. We got recipes from a lot of the
good.
older members and things. And the history part is in there too.
You know, if you got them ready, you guys should sell them when the Smithsonian comes. This
You know, that's a thought. What we're
that
trying
and
to
the
do,
all-school reunion next summer.
well,
When is Smithsonian coming?
It's about the last week of October, all through November, and the first
well, you
week
know,
in December.
Marilyn, when we took them to Nina, she said, well, now when do you want this? Because she's setting it up. Of course, that's what
Yeah.
she did when they
Right.
had the print shop. And then she's putting what pictures we had in with it.
Oh.
And anyway, you know, we didn't know what to say. It sounded like a big job to us, but somebody said, well, it'd be nice, you know, when we have our soup dinner in the church, and I think it's October the 16th. So that's what she's shooting for.
Oh, so
But you're sure right. We might be able to sell a lot of them there.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, so far we've got 60 orders, which just is from families in our own church pretty much. But we could order more, you know, if we
Right.
we're
Well,
selling
we
for
kind of straight away,
$10.
you know, the last time you asked me about Gustav. And that's when the railroad went through here. Then all of this country was wide open. And he had been a miller in Faribault. That's where my dad was born. And he had heard somebody wanted a miller in Payette. So he got on the train and come down, looked it over, they hired him. So he went to work, and then he sent for the family to come later on the train. But then the mill burned down, and he had to
mill
resort
was-
to his carpentry, you know, work there. And then he heard about this land opening up, and he went up to try to get a homestead. But all of the ones that were under the irrigation
already.
were already taken. Well, he didn't want to go out and homestead a piece of sagebrush. So he got talking to Pathel, and Pathel says, well, if you want to come out here, I'll sell you 40 acres of money. So I think Granddad paid him $1,000 for that 40 acres. And that's the way a lot of them, that's the way a lot of them did. They homesteaded, and then they sold off 40 acres to different people, you know, and that's the way they made their money.
One of her granddad, found the same thing. He went into, when they were supposed to open up the homesteading, and some of it was already taken before. They-
Yeah.
You know, some of the affluent people,
Well, yeah, the ones that were,
they got the first pick
Yeah.
before they were supposed to even open it up.
oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of them just went out and squatted.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they put their stakes out and everything, and you better carry a gun if
Yeah.
you want to.
So now the homesteads, they were like those in Oklahoma where Mother, they didn't have to pay anything, they just had to prove up on them.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, 'cause see, Mother's dad, she was born in Oklahoma, and he'd homesteaded, and gosh, it
That
was
was the
very good
best
land, everything
possible
else.
thing that our
But that's
government
what
has
they
ever
did.
done.
And then he was, once he proved up on it, was it 5 years?
Right.
We saw the thing,
Yeah, I
then
think
he could
Sounds
sell
about
it,
right.
see?
Yeah,
And he did. He couldn't hardly make a living in the ground now. It's right at the foot of the Rocky Mountains in Oklahoma, in that little piece that comes out there.
Yeah.
And the dirt's probably about this deep, so about all they can do is they've got cattle, running on it. And they got a few oil wells there, I noticed. But,
So you're in.
it did give people, it was a good thing to do, but didn't work out for everywhere, but anyway.
But I've always heard it takes about 3 different owners for it to really.
To really establish.
Yeah, that's what they said about that new land out here, that the Black
Yeah,
Canyon.
canyon
yeah.
stuff.
Sound Hill, Sand Hollow area, yeah.
Yeah, they always say that. It's just like Granddad coming in here,
Yeah.
and then Dad,
Yeah,
and then myself, and we finally made some money.
Like we
Yeah.
did before,
But,
and it's kind of
But-
nice to do something interesting,
you know, all the time that Dad was farming,
like the funny papers or whatever.
the farm for his mother and his brothers and sisters, they had each, a lot of years had to send money to keep the farm going.
oh, yeah.
He didn't make enough.
Pay the
to do it.
taxes.
Yeah.
So when we come back from Texas finally in '39, why Dad wrote to
This
his
is always good.
7 brothers and sisters and offered them $1,000 apiece
Yeah.
for quit claim deed.
Oh.
So that's how he got this for $7,000.
In 1939.
Yeah. Because he'd come from Texas and they knew he wasn't going to go back. His deal was over with. They had a drought down there. And Dad had advanced a lot of money to growers for seed, fertilizers, and stuff like that. In return, he got
Be a good idea. I think it would be.
the crops.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
from the middle of September until the middle of March, no rain.
yeah, okay,
And it was just,
sounds good.
he lost all of his money.
Oh, yeah.
So he decided, heck with it, and come back to Idaho.
Now, down here on Hengler's, they're grafting. That parent stock that they're grafting to, what is that from?
Well, I'm not sure. Most of the trees were grafted onto quince roots.
Yeah.
Because quince is a much stronger root than an apple. So they use quince. All the ones that we had were from quince. So I don't know. Then they've got into this dwarf tree thing. And I don't know whether those are dwarfs or not. But if they do,
Are.
if they do, what they do is they put in a root and then they put a leader up and then they put one upside down, about a 6-inch piece in between. And that kind of acts as a dam for the sap to go up, so the tree never gets very big.
Oh, for him.
Oh, this is for the way they do the dwarfs.
Yeah, dwarfs. So I don't know, these may be regular trees.
But they were grafting Fuji's. We stopped down
they
there.
stopped and watched them, the guys were out
The
there.
3 Mexican guys, it was really interesting because I'd never been around it. I'd always heard about it.
Yeah,
And I
well,
just
we used
wondered
to,
what the rootstock was. They looked like an apple leaf.
Mm-hmm.
But we
He
talked-
said they were, but they had no flavor. He said
Yeah.
they're not. That's all he could say about them was that an apple, but it has no flavor. It's nothing you would sell itself, that rootstock.
Yeah, that's the quince.
Is that, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the quince.
But I wouldn't think that, nobody, regular apple trees, they don't even have them anymore, do they? Orchards? They're all dwarfs
no.
to the,
Oh, no, Henglers.
I said, Hengler still got
Henglers have a lot of the old trees
trees?
out there, and Surmeyer, still a lot of them left.
But I mean, you'd think if they were planting them, they'd be dwarfs. I don't know. They're a lot
Yeah.
easier to pick.
But it's kind of interesting watching, just, they had a branch about that long, and he would take a bud off each one and
Mm-hmm.
put on it. It was just, I
Yeah,
never
they-
seen it.
Yeah, we did
have a lot of
that.
that.
We did that a lot where we had Red Delicious and had they're not self-propagating, so we had to graft Golden Delicious
Yeah.
inside the tree branches so that they cross.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of that. And then of course when we'd have damage with the mice in there, we'd have to graft stuff there. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but Granddad, when he bought this 40 acres, and they talked about planting fruit trees. Okay, so he bought 11 acres at the back of the place, enough trees for that, and then they were only planted on a 48 to the acre. 30 feet on the square. So when they grew up, they're pretty big trees. And they didn't put they were just putting the ditch in when he come out here, but it didn't have the water here yet. See, the main one came from Emmett, and ended up right here at Palisades Corner. And our ditch is called the West Side Lateral, which comes off of the main ditch, right there. We're the second one on the ditch here. But he didn't have that. So he planted those trees on that 11 acres and got a wagon and these 2 horses and the barrels. And he went down to the spring down below it. I don't know, do you know that there's a spring?
Down below
Down
the
below.
road that goes down.
I remember that.
Well, yeah, you can tell in the spring it's something, it's always
Yeah.
green. And there's a lot of watercress and stuff.
There's
on it.
a strata
That comes out.
through here from Payette River to the Snake River. But it's up above, it's about 20 or 30 feet up above the Snake. So it's just
Well,
nice spring.
you know.
Well, that's where we have our well. Our water comes right from that 40-foot.
Oh, really?
It's only 40 foot. I feel fortunate that it's lasted this long now with all the other wells that are around it.
Right.
So anyway, I still got to go down
He
there
didn't-
and fill up
he
these
didn't
barrels,
build-
$20.
He didn't build it, see, I told you wrong.
Yeah, to build this house. It's right in the abstract. Because she had to take a loan until she got the money back from the house, but she paid it off as soon as she got the house sold.
So there was her and Helen,
And Lola
Lola,
and Irene.
Irene.
And Dorothy for a while, because
Yeah.
Dorothy got married to Blackie Harris,
Yeah.
who lived down here. The Harrises
So there
down
was
at Whitley
Helen.
Bottom.
Okay, that's a lady I've talked to, and I had never heard that name before, and she was telling me all about. I've got to have a more conversation about it with her, how her grandfather had one of the first ones down in the bottom.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, and who is this lady?
I can't think of her name right now, but she is from the Harrises.
Oh, uh-huh.
She lives
Well-
over in Payette now.
Yeah, well-
There was Madge. What was her last name? She was a beautician. And we
Well, I went with one of the Harris girls, not Blackie's, but his brother's granddaughter. And we used to go down there in that old Model T of mine in the summer of '39, and we got down there, and I said, well, I'm not sure that we got enough gas to go home. And she says, well, go on over there, we'll get some from Granddad here, you know. So that was fun.
Yeah, Madge Cooper, she was
Yeah.
related to the
Oh, she
Harrises.
was, she was.
Do you know Madge? Is she still alive?
I don't know. I haven't heard of her for quite a
Or
while.
older. Probably dead and gone.
She did hair.
Yes, she
Yeah,
did.
she was a Harris.
And she was a Harris, and we knew that, and we visited, and, you know.
Really?
But I haven't heard anything about her for ages, you know.
Oh, I've got to get back to that lady. We had so many things happen to us.
But anyway, that's how Granddad got started on the orchards here.
Yeah.
And of course, he was real frustrated in about, did that in '8, and then in '15, 2 years before he died, he planted another 11 acres that he got from Carnifex. No, it was earlier than that, because they come into bearing and they weren't what he ordered. They were all kinds of stuff. And
That happened.
Dad said he got so mad that on his deathbed he went out and cut out all those trees.
Oh, no. He must have been.
He cut them all down, and about a month later he died.
Well, that
He
finished him
was
off,
so mad, you know. And then Dad and Homer and Harold planted that land back to Goodwin's, which really made this place. Well, when I moved out here, we had a big freeze in '48.
Oh, yeah.
And see, those trees were 40 years old then,
Yeah, I can
1908,
remember they were still there
1940.
when we came out here.
And the next spring they didn't leaf out any of them.
Oh,
Killed them dead.
Dead and adorned.
really?
Well, they should have been gone before that.
Oh yeah,
They
they
were
had
too old.
trunks almost as big as this table.
Why? It was pretty big.
So anyway, a guy that worked for Dad and myself, we spent all of '48 cutting down that 11 acres of those old trees. And we couldn't cut off the limbs, you know, first. And then the stumps were so big that we had to drill holes in the top of them and put black powder in and blow them out, because we couldn't handle with our little tractor, couldn't even get them. Well, we pulled all of those up over the hill and down next to that spring.
Oh, yeah?
There was a big canyon where the spring water had cut through there. So we put all of those
Where the freeway is now.
stumps down in there. And if you want to see some apples growing, they're growing there right now.
That's like a mid-vale, you know, you go
Yeah.
there, you still see apple trees.
Something lived off of those stumps, didn't it? Yeah, Mesa's really different now, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
Well, you know what? I know I don't want to wear you out.
No, that's
No.
fine. You just,
Like I
why don't
say,
you take this, and then if you got any questions,
Yeah, well,
all that I've told you is there already.
Well, we will come back because I'm going to have more questions.
Okay.
now, this, I don't know if that's the letter you sent us. These are those obituaries. Then these pictures were in here, Marilyn, and I'll put them back
Oh,
in
okay.
here. And
Yeah.
you use what you want and just,
Yeah, I have lots of questions, and I'll get them together. But I do have questions, and
do
I'm
you
going to
have
have more.
questions that they have wanted you to ask, or what?
No, I
Or
have-
your own?
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah,
how
what-
they did this, if they...
Yeah, well, what Connie wanted, and we're basically doing, but it's her
This is just...
all of her guidelines said was, if we can find out why people came and why did they stay, why didn't they move on, and so many people.
Good a place to move
Well,
on.
so many people I found, though, they came this far, went on over into Oregon.
Yeah, that's
and then
true.
came back,
Came back, yeah.
on their way to go back east, and then they just stopped here and didn't go on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
this is kind of the backwash
See, the
from
train,
the Oregon
the
Trail.
train
Yeah,
went to
yeah.
Oregon, and in fact, some of the Pences came out, but they went clear to Oregon, and then came back here.
Yeah, this
It's
what
like
a,
it didn't stop.
Yeah, see, I'm the historian for our lodge, Washoe Lodge.
oh,
And I spent 5 years getting all that together.
really?
And what was interesting was the people that came from all over the United States and the world, and would stop and sign the register when they went to a meeting, Some of them joined the lodge for a while, then they left and go on. And
Well, they were looking around for
Yeah.
a real place they wanted to stay.
That wasn't any of this stuff?
No,
Okay.
it's just his written copy of this.
But it's,
yeah.
but it's the same old story. They were just looking.
Right.
And then that other, you got that
Can-
other book.
Our lodge has had over 700 members in 10
Yeah,
years.
Really? That's really something. Can you tell me what the woodsman, the order of the something woodsman or something was?
Well, I don't know much about it. I just heard about it. It's kind of like a fraternal organization, like
Yeah.
the Elks, the Moose, and they were